Ted Cruz. You know him as a Texas senator and blobfish who forgot to charge his electric razor. But there's so much more to the man than that. So let's get to know Ted Cruz in another episode of The Daily Showography.
March 4th, 2016.
Let's cut waste, fraud, and abuse. It's easy to say it.
Establishment Republican candidates were making their last stand against Donald Trump. And Senator Ted Cruz of Texas had a gross booger hanging on his lip. And then he ate it, as if none of us could see. This is Ted Cruz, the booger on the lip of democracy. Rafael Edward Cruz was born in Canada to an American woman and a former Cuban revolutionary. When Ted was 4, the Cruzes relocated to Texas.
Houston, we have a problem.
Where his youthful ambition was the same as any higher-order lizard, sex and domination.
Well, my aspiration is to, be in a teen tit film like that guy who played Horatio. You know, he was in Malibu Bikini Beach Shop. Well, other than that, take over the world domination.
Yes, young Ted Cruz was obsessed with boobs and power, 2 things he would struggle to get his hands on for the rest of his life. From there, it was on to Princeton University, where he befriended Craig Mazin, who, as the creator of the HBO series Chernobyl, is familiar with toxic disasters.
Ted Cruz was my roommate. I did not like him at all in college. I want to be clear, because Ted Cruz is a nightmare of a human being. I have plenty of problems with his politics, but truthfully, his personality is so awful that 99% of why I hate him is just his personality. Awful, awful, awful person. Yeah, he's awful.
Ted Cruz was so awful, this professional screenwriter could think of no other word to describe him. That's impressive. After graduating from Harvard Law School, Ted finally found someone who didn't hate him, which left him no choice but to marry her.
We got back from our honeymoon, and he went off to the store and came home by himself. And he arrived back at our apartment with literally 100 cans of Campbell's chunky soup. And I said, you don't buy 100 of anything, much less canned soup. Well, we can't do this. I'll be making things. And he said, no, I know you won't be making things.
And then, because there was no room for both soup and a wife, Ted and Heidi lived apart for 7 years. Cruz used that time to rise through the legal ranks, arguing 8 cases before the Supreme Court, where he championed the rights of mentally ill prisoners to be executed by the state. But his most famous case was a passionate defense of one unusual Texas law.
Cruz's Texas Solicitor General once defended a ban on the sale of sex toys.
That's right. In a show of selfless devotion to the law, Ted Cruz defended a ban on sex toys, even though he himself is a complete dildo. In 2012, Cruz burst onto the national stage as a Senate candidate and darling of the Tea Party. Once elected, he put his mark on the Senate by filibustering Obamacare while showing off his first-grade reading ability.
Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham.
What a treat to hear Dr. Seuss read by a Dr. Seuss character. To achieve his dreams of world domination, Ted knew he would need to leave an impression. And he left impressions everywhere.
There is no try. Do or do not. The force is strong with this one.
Non-stop.
Idly-ho, neighbor.
Just a never-ending parade of barely recognizable voices.
Liar! Shut up, witch! I'm not a witch, I'm your wife!
Even though he couldn't really do any of them.
In the immortal words of William Wallace, freedom!
With charisma like that, there was only one thing for Cruz to do.
I am announcing that I'm running for president of the United States.
I was hyped, it was light in the back. Took a mic, no rights, had the right tracks.
Soon, Ted was cruising toward victory. He had key endorsements.
I've looked at the candidates. Ted Cruz is my man.
A supportive family.
Not a day goes by that my mom is not lifting me up in prayer.
That's right.
For hours at a time.
And fresh ideas.
Of course, in Texas, we cook bacon a little differently than most folks.
Machine gun
gun bacon.
Any hunter can track and shoot an animal, but it takes a true outdoorsman to use a gun on meat he already bought at the store. That's just how unlikable Ted Cruz is. He actually found a way to turn people off of bacon. But despite having the meticulous planning skills and foresight that's just coincidentally the hallmark of a serial killer, Ted Cruz failed to anticipate Donald Trump.
Ted Cruz, he's a absolute disgusting liar.
He is like a little baby. Soft, weak little baby.
This guy's a liar.
Lying Ted Cruz, lying Ted. Lies, oh, he lies.
Donald Trump called his wife ugly and said his father was implicated in the conspiracy to kill JFK.
At first, Ted took the high road, swallowing his pride and a few boogers along the way. But finally, he had had enough.
Cruz got on stage at the RNC and he did not endorse Donald Trump.
Vote your conscience.
That pledge was not a blanket commitment that if you go and slander and attack Heidi, that I'm going to nonetheless come like a servile puppy dog and say thank you very much for maligning my wife and maligning my father.
The gauntlet had been thrown. No longer would Ted Cruz cater to Donald Trump's every whim. He drew a line in the sand and... Oh, hold on, I'm getting a call.
Hi, this is Ted Cruz calling. I was calling to encourage you to come out and vote on Election Day.
Oh, Ted. With nothing left to do, Cruz headed back to the Senate, where he reclaimed his position as the most hated guy in the office.
If you killed Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate, and the trial was in the Senate, nobody could convict you.
I probably like Ted Cruz more than most of my colleagues like Ted Cruz, and I hate Ted Cruz. He's just a toxic coworker. He's the guy that microwaves fish.
There is nothing more dangerous than a reckless asshole who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Ted Cruz.
I'm beginning to understand why Ted Cruz has been hated by everyone, every place he's ever been, from kindergarten to the United States Senate.
I am not endorsing Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz. And I think I'll take cyanide if he ever got the nomination.
God damn. Even people who don't know if mass shootings are bad thinks Ted Cruz sucks. Chastened by this reception, Ted got to work rehabilitating his image. He began doing relatable stuff, like accidentally posting MILF porn on the anniversary of 9/11 and encouraging an insurrection against the government.
We will not go quietly into the night.
Look here, look.
Ted Cruz's objection to the Arizona.
His objection, he was going to sell us out all along. Look, objection to counting electoral votes of the state of Arizona. Wait, no, that's... Oh, no, that's okay. All right, I'm pissed. He's with us.
Oh no. Ted Cruz is so hateable that for a moment, even his biggest fans hated him by accident.
Treason! Treason!
But once the dust settled and the MAGA mob reluctantly decided not to murder him, Ted and his family headed back home to Texas to let things cool down in Washington. Unfortunately, things cooled down even more in Texas.
As Texans wait for a thaw and power to their homes, Senator Ted Cruz is facing backlash after an alleged fellow passenger tweeted out this photo appearing to show Cruz on a flight to Cancun.
He first blamed the trip on his kids. That turned out to be a lie.
The 24-hour trip to Cancun radically shifted America's view of Ted Cruz from a giant, unlikable asshole to... Actually, it didn't shift the view of him at all. But these are just small bumps on the road to his ultimate goal, world domination. To Ted Cruz, the earth is a mere booger dancing on his lips. Tantalizing, mesmerizing, repulsive, waiting until the day he can swallow us whole and hope that no one saw it.
Given the state of the Republican Party right now, you might think that the person they're replacing Liz Cheney with would be a 180-proof Trumpist from the heart of MAGA country. But actually, for most of her political career, Elise Stefanik was the exact opposite.
Elise Stefanik was not always considered a Trump Republican. Stefanik was seen as a moderate when, in 2014, she won a House race in upstate New York at age 30.
She was the youngest woman ever elected to Congress when she first won this office. And at that time, she was a pretty classic East Coast moderate conservative.
In 2015, 2016, and the early days of the Trump administration, Stefanik repeatedly and publicly opposed Trump.
Opposing him on NAFTA and trade, even voting against his signature 2017 tax cuts.
She also criticized Trump's initiative to build a wall, saying, quote, "I don't think that's realistic." In 2015, Stefanik also disagreed with Trump's calls for a Muslim ban, saying, "This is not who we are as a country." And Stefanik wrote this after the release of the Access Hollywood tape. Donald Trump's inappropriate, offensive comments are just wrong.
I've disagreed with the president's rhetoric numerous times when it comes to how he addresses women.
So Elise Stefanik didn't like Trump's tax cuts, didn't like his trade deals, didn't like his Muslim ban, didn't like his sexism, didn't even like his wall. She basically didn't like anything about Trump, which is insane. I mean, you expect that from Trump's wife, but not a Republican congresswoman. So for a while, Stefanik was pretty much what used to be called a normal Republican. And then in late 2019, she saw an opportunity to make like Billie Eilish and give herself an eye-catching new image.
Elise Stefanik became the breakout star of the House hearings for Trump's first impeachment, often tangling with Democrats.
To have our Democratic colleagues say these untruthful statements just reeks of political desperation in their continued obsession to manipulate mainstream media coverage.
Trump was so impressed at the time, he tweeted, "A new Republican star is born." After Trump lost and started pushing the big lie, Elise Stefanik signed on, fighting to overturn the 2020 electoral results in both Pennsylvania and Texas. As this newly minted version of Stefanik moved ever closer to Trump's orbit, her fundraising exploded, and so did her profile. Stefanik became a regular on Fox News, and her cheerleading for Team Trump moved into hyperdrive. Stefanik was clearly on Trump's radar, even if he couldn't pronounce her name.
Elise Stefanik.
Look, you can't take offense to that. Trump pronounces words like a great jazz musician. You'll never hear it the same way twice. Now, to outsiders, this might have seemed like Stefanik suddenly embracing the dark side, like Anakin turning into Darth Vader, except for the part about wearing a mask. But the truth is, she probably just made a straightforward calculation. She saw where the party was going, and she decided to go along with it. It's just a little awkward to start rooting for someone after they've been publicly disgraced. I never really liked R. Kelly's music, but now that I've heard the charges against him, it's kind of dope. It's the Mr. Put my fish out the kitchen. I mean, are you guys hearing this? And once Stefanik hopped on the Trump train, she never looked back. In fact, these days, it can sometimes be hard to tell her and Trump apart.
Democrats are obsessed with impeachment.
They have been obsessed with impeachment.
The phony Russia hoax.
The phony Russia hoax of Russia collusion.
We need election integrity and election reform immediately.
We want to be able to fix and strengthen our election security and election integrity.
Sleepy Joe rejects the scientific approach in favor of locking all Americans in their basements for months on end.
Joe Biden wants to keep them locked up in the basement.
Damn. This goes way beyond just agreeing with Trump. It actually sounds like she's preparing to play Trump in a movie. I must become Trump. This is my process. So, in the end, Elise Stefanik surrendered her principles, her dignity, and even her voice to Donald Trump. And what did that get her? Enormous amounts of cash, the support of a passionate base of voters, the inside track to a powerful position in party leadership? Yes, it gave her all those things. But was it worth it? Because it seems like it was kind of worth it. I mean, god damn. For the past 20 years, Alex Jones has hosted radio and internet shows. He's on 150 radio stations. He has 8 million people who visit his website every single month, and he has 1 billion views on YouTube. He's basically like the Gangnam Style of the far right. And to his millions of followers, he's always been this guy.
I know all of this. I know they're spraying us every day. I know they're spraying my family. I know we're all filled with heavy metals. The UN says if you don't play ball with them, they'll just spray you and shut down your weather. I'm broken out of the trance. I'm angry. I'm freaked out. I'm going, my God, they're terraforming. My God, sodium fluoride in the water. My God, they funded Hitler. I understand what's going on. I read their eugenics documents. The hair on the back of my neck standing up right now. I want to warn you, they should all arrest them. Arrest the bankers. They're robbing. God, I can't believe it.
Yeah, so he's a pretty chilled out guy. That guy's freaking out. You know what? People who freak out about chemtrails are the funniest thing ever. What are the planes doing? What are they spraying in the air? What are they spraying? It's water vapor. What, do you look at clouds and then be like, what is that? Poison bombs in the sky? What are those things? Why is that giraffe floating? What's happening there? This guy must be so terrified every time he takes a shower. Like, opens the water, he's like, oh no, the poison dust is coming out of the vents. What's happening? Like, I don't know who this person is, and I'm going to tell you something that's probably going to shock you. A little while ago, Alex Jones's wife divorced him. I know, people. I know it's crazy to think someone would leave that. Now, it gets even crazier because she also thinks that for some reason, he shouldn't have custody of their children. Which means now he has to go to court. Which means...
The InfoWars host in a legal battle for custody of his children. His lawyers say the fire breather on the web isn't the real Alex Jones, that he, quote, is playing a character, that he's a performance artist.
All right, let me stop you right there. You're not a performance artist, okay? Jugglers are performance artists. And they also shouldn't have custody of their children. But still, they are artists. Alex Jones is a fake. Which, by the way, people have a right to be. 50 Cent, be a billionaire. Hulk Hogan, have a massive penis. The problem with Alex Jones is that his act has real consequences, right? His fans don't think he's acting. When he says 9/11 was a government conspiracy, or when he says mass shootings are fake, or when he says there's a pizza shop in DC full of pedophiles, which is a real thing he said, by the way, his fans want to do something about it. One InfoWars fan even armed himself, went to that pizza shop, and shot at people. And on top of that, didn't even tip. Now, the scariest thing about Alex Jones is that fan only had one gun. One of his biggest fans has an entire army.
You're saying you're fully committed, there's no future if we don't take this country back. Donald Trump, I hope you can help uncripple America.
You'll be looking at me in a year or 2 years. Let's give me a little bit of a time to run things. But a year into office, you'll be saying, wow, I remember that interview. He said he was going to do it, and he did a great job. You'll be very proud of him.
Do you love me now, Daddy? Do you love me now? Do you see me, Daddy?
You know what's strange is now I see why Donald Trump has always liked Alex Jones. Yeah, they're basically doing the same thing. Trump is also a character who whips people up with whatever provocative bull works. And then when it suits him, he steps away. Drain the swamp, folks. We're gonna drain the swamp. And then he gets in, and then these people, and he's like, yeah, who cares? On the campaign, he's like, China is raping us on trade, everybody. And then all of a sudden he goes, President China ate my cake. It's cool. We're good now. Like maybe Trump is also a performance artist. Maybe this is all a scam. Maybe if he went to court, it would come out. Like, wouldn't that be crazy to find out that Donald Trump the entire time has been somebody else? Like at the White House, he's making speeches outside like, and what we're gonna do with the wall, we're gonna make sure. And then he goes inside and he sits down next to Melania. And then Melania's like, what's wrong, Donald? You seem stressed today. And he's like, oh my God, Melania, the people are just... They're so insufferable, Melania. I really can't handle it. I mean, why do they keep, I try everything. Sometimes I wonder if I'm gonna keep on doing, I just like, oh, hold on.
Hello? Fox News? Yeah. This is what I'm gonna do about the Mexicans. Okay, bye-bye now.
I'm like, they're just the worst. They really are. Just the worst. Could be a possibility. And that man is a fan of Alex Jones. So look, at the end of the day, Alex Jones may not get his children back, but at least he has custody of the most powerful child in the world.
Meet the alt-right.
White lives matter! White lives matter!
A loosely connected group of right-wing white nationalists, known for chanting confusing conspiracy theories like all while dressed like kids whose divorced dads made their Halloween costumes. And these World War II reenactment rejects have one other thing in common. They are angry.
But what do they have to be so angry about? I'm a white guy, things are great. Cops don't pull me over, I pull them over to ask for a bottle opener. Thanks, officer. No, you have a great day.
There's no logical reason why the alt-right should be so angry. They're kind of winning. But what if there was a deeper reason for their frustration?
Across the alt-right movement, leaders are telling young men not to masturbate.
Wait. What?
Clinical psychologist Dr. David Lay has a theory about why these young men are so angry. They're not strangling their pepes.
They know how to masturbate. They're not going side to side, right? They know it's up and down.
I don't think this is a technique issue. They are actually trying not to masturbate.
Used to take me hours. Now it's like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, I have one hand, so,
Right.
you know, it gets lots of practice.
This guy masturbates. Dr. Lay explained that the main proponents of this no wank philosophy were the Proud Boys.
Masturbation is lack of impulse control.
The Proud Boys believe that not masturbating increases their testosterone and makes them more desirable to women, which brings up one question.
Is it working for the Proud Boys?
Research actually finds that less masturbation reduces testosterone.
So there's evidence that masturbating makes you a more masculine man.
A lot of really good things happen in your body and your brain. But also research is finding that people who watch more pornography, they are more feminist, and interestingly, they develop more egalitarian values over time.
You're right. I watch a lot of gangbangs, and one day I thought, oh my God, women have it so hard. This isn't fair. 95 guys and one girl? We need some better representation here.
And the Proud Boys are just the tip. There are stroke shamers all over the alt-right.
So Canadian psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson, he's leader in the alt-right movement in Canada. And he tells young men there's nothing noble about masturbating to pornography.
That's terrible. I mean, what else are they going to do up there in between periods of hockey?
That's noble. That's healthy.
Exactly, that's healthy.
David Duke, who is a former Grand Wizard of the KKK, he believes that pornography is a Jewish conspiracy to get young white men to masturbate instead of procreating, and so the white race dies out.
What is it about the Jews with these guys? And speaking of which, this far-right moratorium on salami wrestling has been going on longer than you think.
The Nazis taught young men not to masturbate. Nazis used sexual suppression as a way to increase malleability in people. If we can get people to give up masturbation, we can get them to do anything.
First they came for our fleshlights, and I said nothing.
So it's not just the insidious beliefs, mob violence, and haircuts. The alt-right jacked this off the Nazis too?
They're teaching these kids to hate themselves, to be ashamed of themselves, and then they can exploit them.
Wow.
They go down this rabbit hole of these extreme, dangerous beliefs and become radicalized.
So what you're saying is masturbation can save lives?
Definitely.
You know what? Let's do it right now. Let's show them all. Let's go. I love talking to you, man. Come on. Take out your dick! We can't show you the rest of that interview, but I will say, when I think about these young people being manipulated into joining hate groups, it makes me very angry and frustrated and excuse me for 1 second. Anyway, if you or anyone you know seems to be getting drawn into the alt-right, before buying that tiki torch, try lighting the one inside your khakis first. I'm Michael Costa, telling all you young angry men to stop hating and start baiting.